We're going to allow one more minute to let more people in, and then we'll get started, everyone. Thank you, Sam. All right, Leah, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Sam. Good evening, everybody. Always very happy to see all of you, especially the familiar faces, the repeat students, colleagues, etc. My name is Leah LaRue, and I'm the Director of Neighborhood Planning for the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning. Welcome to NPU University, to our Community Development course in our Invest Atlanta series. This is 1004.003. This is the third class in a series of 4. The name of the class, as you see in front of you, is Density Matters and Neighborhood Revitalization. We're really excited to, pardon the background noise, as you can see, I'm still in the office. We're really excited to present this class to you. I believe this is the first time we're producing this class. It was in the agenda for last year and we ended up having to cancel it. So this is the first time we're producing this class. With that in mind, I would ask that you remain as gracious and as patient as you can, as everyone here is, sorry, I'm at work and all these people are walking by and stuff. Sorry about that. Certainly, please do remain patient and gracious, as all of us are presenting this class for the very first time, working together very collaboratively. I'm happy to have our partners and the producers of this course in the room, Invest Atlanta, and we have some folks from the city that will be joining as well. So we're joined tonight by my colleagues, Samantha Terry, who is the program manager for education and training, and she's also our NPU University registrar. Samantha.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here tonight.
And Tony McNeil is our program manager for outreach and engagement initiatives. Tony.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you both for being here. Okay, so we're going to talk real briefly about NPU University. We created NPU University in 2019 to promote equity, in an effort to make sure that residents all over the city have access to the same tools and resources. We saw, and I explain this from time to time, in the first few months that I was in this role, I did a little road show, visited all the NPUs around the city, and saw a very noticeable and obvious difference in the way we deliberated over applications, and the way we discussed the issues, and even in the way we planned our neighborhoods. I wanted to make sure that the Department of City Planning was doing its part to put resources and tools into everyone's hands equally. Not every NPU has, engineers and architects and urban planners and zoning attorneys and the like on their boards or in their membership. And those that do have a very different level of discourse than those that do not. So we wanted to make sure that we at least provide the information to all of the MPUs and all of the residents and business owners across the city of Atlanta to make sure that you've got some tools and resources in your pocket as well. All right, so quickly we'll go into our classroom rules. Those of you that have been around know that these are rules for every single class. Please do keep your microphone muted at all times. This helps us cut back on background noise, feedback, and the like. It allows everyone to hear what is being said so that there's no competition in microphones and things like that. Please keep your cameras on in order to receive course credit. If you're just sitting in on the class, obviously you do not have to have your camera on, but if you are in the Citizen Planner Certificate Program and you're taking this course for credit, you do need to have your camera on in order to receive credit. If you have a question during the Q&A, raise your hand to get in the queue. If you have a question during the Q&A, raise your hand to get in the queue. I'll show you in a minute how to go about raising your hand, but please do not just unmute yourself and blurt out a question or start asking. We'll let you know when it's time to ask questions, and we'll try to get as many of them as possible. Obviously, it depends on the discussion and the timing and how many questions we have, how much space we have for questions. But I always remind people that if we do not have time to get to your question, or if your question is complex and better suited offline, we will get an answer to you. Samantha will send out a survey at the end of the class. One of the last questions in that survey is, do you have any questions that weren't answered? And if you give us your name and your email address and those questions, we will get the answers for you and send them to you. Last but not least, this is our golden rule. All questions must be relevant to course content. This is not the place. I will say this at every single class. I'm so sorry if you've heard me say it a million times, but I'm gonna say it again. This is not the place to work out personal issues with the city, personal issues with Invest Atlanta, issues about what's going on your block that are not relevant to course content. If you have a question, it must be relevant to course content. Questions end with a question mark. This is also not the opportunity to make speeches or give commentary on your opinions, particularly not if they are political in nature. Please make sure that you're limiting any questions that you have to actual questions and to questions that are relevant to course content. Bonus points if your questions are beneficial to everyone in the room and not just you. All right. We'll show you how to raise your hand in the event you're not sure how to do it or haven't done it in a while. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a button that says reactions if you are on a computer. If you're on a phone or another mobile device, you may have to tap the screen in order to see that option, and it may be found under the More button. If you click on reactions, you'll see a pop-up, and then you will see at the bottom of that pop-up the button that says raise hand. You'll hit reactions first, and then you'll hit raise hand to raise your hand. If you're not sure how to do it or you haven't done it in a while, you can go ahead and practice and raise your hand. We will know that you're just practicing and we'll lower it for you. All right, I believe that is it, right, Sam? Yes, good. Okay, so I have the distinct pleasure of introducing some of my esteemed colleagues tonight. Is everyone, Samantha, all of these people are present and accounted for? Yes? Okay, great. So we have with us, of course, Invest Atlanta, and representing Invest Atlanta is Maya Jackson, who's on the Business Retention and Expansion team, Samira Ajani, who is the Assistant Director of West Side Initiatives, Ashley Rivera, who is the Assistant Director of Neighborhood Revitalization, and Michelle Lewis, who leads Community Engagement for Invest Atlanta. We also have with us tonight my colleague, Doug Young, who is the Director of the Office of Design here at the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning, and David Edwards, the Policy Advisor for Neighborhoods in the Office of the Mayor. You guys have such an amazing lineup of folks who will talk to you tonight about neighborhood revitalization, about density, about why density matters when it comes to neighborhood revitalization, how sites are selected, all of the good stuff that we've been eager to put in front of you for the last year. So without further ado, I understand, is Dr. Clementich here, Samantha? Is she? No, okay, great. All right, no problem. So with that said, I am going to pass the microphone to David Edwards, who again is the policy advisor to the mayor on neighborhoods. So Michelle is going to pull up the presentation and she'll be driving. Thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy the class.
Well, thank you, Leah, and thank you all for inviting me. And it's a real pleasure and honor to be here to speak with all of you. This is a fantastic program and effort, and I'm very pleased to be part of it, and I hope to be a continuing part of this work as we move forward. I've only got 10 minutes, and I'm going to have quite a bit of content to spin through here. But let me just tell you, as I said, as Leah said, I'm David Edwards, and policy advisor for neighborhoods in the mayor's office. And as you may know, the mayor has stood up an organization inside the mayor's office, the first of its kind, to focus on neighborhoods. And so I'm part of a larger team. There's about 15 of us working under our chief policy advisor, Courtney English. And our job is to drive the city's strategy to improve our neighborhoods across the city. And so tonight, I'm just going to give you a very quick summary of this work, and I'll be around to answer any questions you might have after I've finished. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. So we all want our neighborhoods to be healthy, and we also know that our neighborhoods are not equally healthy around the city. We have many neighborhoods that are thriving and many neighborhoods that are distressed. And so part of this work is to close that gap between those neighborhoods that are thriving and those that are in distress. Well, at the end of the day, all neighborhoods can improve, and our focus will be on all neighborhoods. We want all neighborhoods to get better. All of you who represent neighborhoods know that there are things you'd like to fix in your neighborhoods, that you have visions that you'd like to achieve. But while we're doing that across all of our neighborhoods, we have to also focus on closing the gaps we have, which are significant in Atlanta, as you know. And so these are just some of the statements that we've been using to describe the nature of the problem we face. If you look at, as I'm sure you have seen, and those of you who went to the neighborhood summit, you probably saw the data that showed how disparate we have in outcomes that we have, the disparities we have in outcomes across the city in education, in crime, in economic development, in economic mobility. And so this is what we're trying to do, is close those gaps. And that's really about a place-based agenda. How do we change the conditions in neighborhoods that particularly children are growing up in, that generate these outcomes and these disparities that we worry about? So I'm not going to read the slide to you. You can read this, but this is effectively the theory of change here, that we are going to go through a place-based transformation strategy focused on closing racial equity gaps. And we're going to do it through public-private partnerships between the city, the nonprofit community, and the business and philanthropic leadership. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. So this is this overall statement that we have, that's governing this work. And we want a city of safe, healthy, connected neighborhoods with an expansive culture of equity. So I think the bottom line is that if all of our families and children are living in safe, healthy, and connected neighborhoods, all the outcomes we worry about will improve. You can go to the next slide. For those of you who decided to dig into the transition team report, there was a section in there, and when the mayor came into office, on neighborhood empowerment, which obviously is uniquely of interest to this group. And there were a set of recommendations that came out of that report, and this is what my team is responsible for implementing. And so, the short way of describing it is that we are going to deploy all of our public resources, including our housing resources, as I'm sure you heard, the mayor and the community foundation announced another $200 million that we're going to invest in affordable housing in the city. We're going to deploy those assets while building the infrastructure in our neighborhoods, the civic infrastructure in our neighborhoods, all of which you represent, to develop and deploy neighborhood improvement plans that are comprehensive and that leverage the partnerships across all the sectors I just mentioned. And we're going to measure the impact of this work to determine if we are in fact closing these gaps that I described earlier. So that's the kind of short version of what the Neighborhood Empowerment Committee recommended back in at the first few months of the administration. And this is what this team that I described is charged with delivering. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. So I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of these differences that we see across the city. And these are the crime rates across all of our NPUs. And I obviously won't go through these in detail, but it's quite striking if you look at these numbers, how different we see the crime across our city. But the good news, if you look carefully at these graphs, is that crime is going down across the city over time. This data is from 2009 to 2022. And you'll notice that most of these curves are heading downwards. And so the good news is our city is getting safer. We've had an upturn in the last 2 years, as I'm sure you're all aware. But even with that upturn, crime is down significantly than it has been in the past. But it's not down everywhere equally. And so part of what we're trying to do is develop strategies to improve crime outcomes everywhere, but particularly in places where it continues to be persistently high. You go to the next slide. So the way we are focused on these improving these outcomes is to look at our neighborhoods specifically and develop financeable and implementable strategies. And what we've decided, the mayor has directed us to do, and this is really a recommendation that came out of the transition team, was to focus on some key corridors to start with. And so my team, as we speak, are focused on some specific geographies in the city. And what that requires is working with neighborhood leaders, working with stakeholders in those neighborhoods, develop these strategies, mobilize the partners that can finance and implement those strategies, make sure that they are ultimately owned by the neighborhoods, and then develop the approaches that are going to be needed to sustain the work over time. And so that's the thrust of the work there, working with neighbors, develop strategies. And we're not doing planning for planning's sake here. We're looking for strategies that we can actually finance and implement. Go to the next slide. These are the corridors that we're focusing on. And so you can see the Hollowell corridor, and it's really the three geographies that we describe as English Avenue, Bankhead, Grove Park, West Side Park, and West Hollowell. The Campbellton Road corridor, really catalyzed by the fact that MARTA is making its BRT investment there. So we want to make sure that investment gets fully leveraged in improving the quality of lives of the residents of those adjacent neighborhoods. We've divided that up into an East Campbellton Road area and a West Campbellton Road area. And then Thomasville Heights was also selected, as I'm sure you were aware of the Forest Cove Apartments challenges that we've had in the last year, and the fact that there's a significant amount of public land, including public housing land in that neighborhood. So that was also selected. But these were also selected, carefully, because we wanted to have a distribution across the city that we knew could catalyze improvement across, beyond these where these yellow circles are. We know that this work has impacts beyond the neighborhoods in which those investments are made. And so we're hopeful that by choosing these three areas, we can actually expand the impact of these investments. You can go to the next slide. These are significant areas. So the city of Atlanta, as you probably know, is about 500,000 residents. These areas alone have 70,000 residents in them. So these, and as you can see by these graphs, these are parts of our cities that have not had the benefit of the revitalization that's gone on across the city of Atlanta really over the last 30 years. Population has declined in the last 10 years in these areas. Poverty rate is double what it is across the city, and the vacancy rate is almost 3 times what it is on the city average. So these are areas that have really been neglected in the past. I don't need to remind you of the history of why these are distressed areas, but our history of racialized policies have really isolated and disinvested these neighborhoods, and that's why they're a focus of our team. but they all have assets. And so, and I won't read you these now, but if you look through these neighborhoods, there are ways that we can, we think, catalyze reinvestment and revitalization in these areas. Some of these are have large tracts of public land, whether they be city public housing land or West Atlanta land or school properties. So we're leveraging public land. We're also looking for places where there's already private investment. So the Microsoft campus, potential Microsoft campus in Grove Park is an example of that. So we've been spending our time looking for what are the assets that we can actually invest in these neighborhoods, such that we can help catalyze the revitalization that I described. You go to the next slide, Sean. That's it. So that is the story, and I'll be happy to hang around here and answer any questions you all might have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm sorry, it was on mute. I am Michelle Lewis. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for Invest Atlanta. And in case you don't know, Invest Atlanta is the Economic Development Authority for the City of Atlanta. And that means lots of things. We are responsible for financing multifamily affordable housing in the city, as well as providing financing for small businesses, for wooing in new businesses, attracting them to the city from elsewhere, and also revitalization. And that said, it's those components and our team members that help us push forward to make certain that our mission and our vision are front facing. And that mission is to advance Atlanta's global competitiveness, growing a strong economy, building vibrant communities, and increasing economic prosperity and equity for all Atlantans. I'm going to now introduce one of our community partners who is very helpful in making sure that we reach the goals with revitalization across the city. She comes with a wealth of experience. Sharon Guest with, I want to make sure that I have it right. It's Radiant Develops.
Radiant Development Partners.
There you go. All right, thank you, Sharon. And just let me know when you're ready for me to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm going to go off script a little bit. I'm used to talking to NPU one at a time. So having a bunch of NPUs is a little nerve-wracking. So bear with me. Yeah, you talk about density and urban density. We often hear the word density, and it usually comes with a negative connotation, because as soon as we hear the word density, the first thing we ask is, how many buildings are they going, how many units are they going to build? How many homes are they going to build? How is this going to impact my neighborhood? And so I think we have to get real about what's happening in Atlanta and the growth in Atlanta. And density, we have to define it. And I think we need to understand what density means in the context of revitalization. And it's not just measuring how many people in a space. Density has a very complex definition, and we often just hone in and linger on the one aspect of how many units, how many homes, how many people. But what my message to you all is to really start looking at the part in the definition of density that has to do with design and planning, what we refer to as smart density, because at the end of the day, the people are coming. And what you want to do is be in partnership with your developers and your community to make sure that what is being built is smart in terms of building communities that are flexible and diverse and offers opportunities within your neighborhoods and your communities. The way we are shifting, not only in our neighborhoods and our communities and our cities in this country, technology, mobility, all of these factors change how we look at density in general. You have people who commute to work, who live in the outskirts and the suburbs, you vice versa. So it's very hard to measure the impact of people in an area because people are constantly moving in and out. And so as you look at your communities and you look at your neighborhoods and you participate in the process of revitalization, you really want to focus in on how can you work with your developers to ensure that you have sustainable measures within those plans. Sustainability is the buzzword, and it's been around for several years now, and it's going to remain in place. But it's very important because sustainability, those factors such as green space, green building, and sustainability also has to do with socialization of people, and it helps to create opportunities. Those are the measures that are important when you're talking about absorbing the type of density that you see in communities and development. So you can turn to the other slide. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's about to happen. I mean, everybody here, everybody lives in Atlanta. Everybody knows the traffic. We all see it. We all feel it. And so Atlanta is expected to receive another 2.5 million people by 2040. And 500,000 of those people are going to be right here within the city limits. And we're already busting at the seams. So I hate to break the news to everybody if they didn't already realize it. The people are here and the people are continue to come, which is a wonderful thing for our city. And so density cannot be avoided. You cannot have revitalization and not have density. We cannot have a thriving city. We cannot have a growing city. We cannot have technology. We cannot have all of these wonderful things that come with our city, without having the people. And so whether we like it or not, we got to deal with the fact that our communities and our neighborhoods will have more people. And how do we embrace that? I am a native of Atlanta, so I have seen Atlanta change a lot over, I'm not going to tell you how long it's been because then you'll know how old I was, but it's been a very, very, very long time. And if I'm being honest, I was probably one who was probably, even as a developer, probably did not embrace change as much as you would think a developer would embrace change. However, because of where we are, we have to embrace it. And with that many people coming to Atlanta, all of our neighborhoods will be impacted. And the best thing, and I keep going back to design and partnerships, the best thing we can do is to all work together to ensure that the communities are built in such a way that it creates the opportunity and fosters the opportunity for better holistic communities. One thing, having done work around the city, there are communities you work in, and some communities say we don't want apartments. You have some communities say we don't want low income, houses. We want single family. We want retail. Well, in order to get retail, you have to have bodies. In order to get bodies, you have to build homes. You have to build apartments. You have to have density. So you can't create a thriving community unless you bring the bodies to that community. And so setting realistic expectations around some of the desires within certain neighborhoods, we've got to be able to just set that playing field. And even just so you understand that part of just creating these communities and making sure that they thrive requires density. So just getting away from the negative connotation that density is bad is where we need to move away from, because density is good. It's good for the city. It's good for the communities. It's good for those communities seeking to rebuild their communities, to bring more retail, bring more grocery, bring more amenities to their space. And so several things that need to just happen in general as we talk about what density is, what revitalization is, and how we bring those together is just take a different look at, well, not focus on just the numbers, but focus on the design and work with your developers, and hold your developers accountable. Make sure that when you when they're coming through your process, so to make sure that you address some of the sustainability questions and push the envelope. I mean, it's a tough time right now in the development space. Things are expensive. It's expensive to build. But always make sure you push the envelope on trying to ensure that they build in such a way that it fosters what the neighborhood and the community needs. What I will say is that the city of Atlanta and Invest Atlanta and a lot of the state agencies do a very good job at putting certain policies and design standards in place already that creates and fosters a lot of sustainability measures. So we have some very good local and state agencies that already ensure that we do a really good job in that area. But one thing we have to understand is that we have to recognize and embrace that. I think it's very important because I've gone to different NPUs in different neighborhoods all over the city, and we have to embrace that a neighborhood is great when it's made up of a diverse group of people, and that's super important. And I think we just need to all understand and accept that. And I think we're going to end up seeing more of that as the city continues to grow. I think everybody just has to accept that Atlanta's growing fast. I mean, the number is 2.5 million by 2040. I wouldn't be surprised if it surpasses that number. And so I think one thing that everybody needs to do is just accept that you will be impacted. Your neighborhoods will be impacted. Your communities will be impacted. So how do we work together to ensure that we are building the best communities and revitalizing the best neighborhoods in a way that is accepting and inclusionary of everyone? So I think that's one thing. So partnership is key in making sure all of this happens. And I just think if we all work together, we can figure out how to build a better Atlanta. But in terms of just the word density and revitalization, if we can just switch the gears and not focus on honing in on the number of units, and just look at more holistically the types of design that are going into the neighborhoods, I think it'll be just a better approach to how we look at development overall. But density is a much bigger, much more complex definition. And it really would take an architect and planners to really explain all of the complexities of the word. But it's not just the bodies that are living in a community. It is a whole gamut of factors that play into it. And so if we just focus on ensuring that we have holistic communities, I think we're in much better shape as we look towards revitalizing our neighborhoods and communities across the city.
Did you just use a whole lot of words to say don't be afeared?
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Can you see me? There we go. I appreciate your take on why density is important for us to embrace. I'm going to bring now on a colleague from Invest Atlanta. That will be Maya Jackson. She is in our ED team, specifically Business Retention and Expansion Program. Maya?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see all of your lovely faces today. Like Michelle mentioned, I am on our economic development team here at Atlanta, and I specifically focus on supporting our existing businesses, whether they're trying to expand or they want to just know what's the best way to stay.
Can everyone hear her?
Maya, your
No.
You're granular.
No.
real bad. Yeah,
Let's see.
bad. Yeah.
Maybe a weak connection. Maybe you can move around a little bit.
Or disable your video to see if that helps out any.
That might help too.
Is this better or worse?
Make sure that you didn't log in twice. That happened to me and I ended up with an echo for a whole meeting.
Okay, Michelle, you wanna holler at
Maya, it's still not coming through clear.
It's pretty choppy. Are you?
I would probably recommend she log out and
Yeah,
log
log
back
out,
in,
log back in.
and we can go to the person
next one?
after her. Yeah.
Okay. So Maya, if you can hear us, that's what we're gonna do. Just log out, log back in, and we'll.
And she may have to take off her headset too.
Okay. So I'll skip then to Ashley Rivera.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm pleased to be here with my colleague and counterpart, Samira Johnny. Together we work on the issues of neighborhood revitalization across the city, both through deploying the resources available through our TADs, our tax allocation districts, working on some of our city-owned property acquisitions as well as dispositions to advance the goals of the city, as well as make an impact on those sites in the neighborhoods where they reside. And many other areas that we touch, but those are the two that we're going to focus on today. So you can go to the next slide. I'm going to kick us off by talking a little bit about our TADs. The tax allocation districts in the city of Atlanta, there are 10. They were established between 1992, the last ones were established in 2006. And so this is a localized established district, a small geography, each of the 10 within the city, and then some increment in the property taxes from within that district are used to finance improvements. And those districts are identified as being areas that have had significant disinvestment or underdevelopment over time and have significant barriers to redevelopment. And so, the benefit of TADs that are used across the United States, it's called tax increment financing everywhere else. In Georgia, we call it tax allocation districts. And so it's a great way to generate the funds needed to incentivize the type of redevelopment that a community wants to see in a community that needs it. It's a way to identify the barriers and direct that funding to the barriers that the regular market or the regular development community is not able to overcome or solve. And it's a way of self-financing in a way where that area is generating the funds through its own property taxes to fund the redevelopment needs of those. One of our very common ones is Atlantic Station. It makes this for a really good example. It was the Atlantic Steel Mill previously. You can see that before picture. Of course, if you've been to Atlantic Station, a tax allocation district for all of Atlantic Station is a TAD, and the redevelopment itself, the value of the proposed entire redevelopment of Atlantic Station enabled us to issue a bond on that future revenue of property taxes to fund a lot of the infrastructure needs, cleanup, remediation, site-based infrastructure, entire urban infrastructure that goes underneath all of the developments that Sharon, for example, brings, relies on city infrastructure. Under that steel mill, there was none of that infrastructure. And so in order for the private sector to be able to come, get financing and build community, the TAD was able to finance some of that initial work to enable the redevelopment of that site. Next slide. So here's the TADs we have across Atlanta. Atlantic Station has done its work. Those bonds were for that initial work. It no longer funds projects. Atlantic Station is complete. There's small work that goes on. That's nothing that the TAD has a role in. Same thing with Princeton Lakes. That was a whole planned community in Southwest Atlanta that required some TAD to stand up. But if we have anybody who's not very familiar with TAD, our Invest Atlanta 101 or public financing classes really get a little bit deeper into how they work. Next slide. And so the range of projects that have been implemented by TADs across the city include the Moores Mill Village and the Perry Bolton TAD, some of the apartment complex on the East Side TAD, just south of the King Memorial Station, Marshawn, redeveloping underused parcels into affordable housing is one of the goals of many of the TADs, as well as our downtown has some. So there's some downtown objectives, which is a neighborhood. Since this is a neighborhood redevelopment and revitalization conversation, it's important to remember that downtown is a neighborhood, but it's also many things, right? So lots of the goals of downtown also include things that help keep it active as a central business district, a tourism destination, a place for visitors and corporate activities to take place. And a big part, the Katherine Johnson Park there illustrates it, is community infrastructure, green space, trails, and connectivity. And so these are one of the things that are real important for community revitalization. Some of these public infrastructure that is something that everybody can use, the active green spaces as well as passive green spaces are what help bring quality of life to communities. And so then as private development occurs, be they single family or apartment homes, businesses, places of employment, the people who occupy those spaces have some of these nice places to occupy, and it helps bring up the neighborhood for all people, regardless of whether they're working there, driving, coming through for recreation or residing. And so, the TAD has really been able to put a lot of resources to play across those 10 districts to make big changes in neighborhood revitalization. But to give you kind of like a deeper dive, just real quick, I'm going to go into a bit deeper on the Perry Bolton TAD, Moores Mill Village, that Publix. This is the kind of conversation we see in lots of communities where they're looking for redevelopment of big sites that have become older and sort of outlived their usefulness. Perhaps they were built 50 years ago, and so the retail plaza or the office building, for example, might be just not what the market demands anymore. And also, if it's experienced disinvestment or blight, sometimes there's a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of bring them back around, and new amenities or new services desired by the community. So if you had to go to the next slide, we'll take a look at this site. This is in Northwest Atlanta along Bolton Road and Marietta Boulevard, right before you get out of the city and cross the Chattahoochee into Cobb County, if you want some of the context. And so the site is in green, and I originally had some staging of the shape, so the shape's kind of covering it up. But this is an aerial from 2002. It's got the buildings underneath, kind of to the left side of the site, under the green, were unoccupied. They had a grocery store until a little bit after 2002, but the sewage infrastructure, the wastewater and stormwater runoff was not happening appropriately. So like 2 of the buildings were unable to be occupied any longer. And then the other parts were just outused their life, and the owners were no longer willing to invest what it took and wanted to sell and redevelop them. But you can see with the roads that surround it, there was real connectivity issues. It's a huge parcel. This is one big old triangle, really funny looking triangle. And so there was a lot of challenges with the site. And so if you go to the next slide, the community in setting up the TAD identified that site as a place where they wanted to see more retail, a grocery store, other amenities, but also it just needed a whole change in the way the community could interact with the site. Bolton Road, if you are familiar, it exits out to Fulton Industrial Boulevard. It's a very big commercial and commuter corridor. Marietta Boulevard goes from downtown to Cobb County, and similarly on the north side is connectivity through Buckhead. So there was not much to do there, yet tremendous traffic and lots of other challenges. So they identified the site, but developers gave the message that there was difficulties and barriers because the large amount of infrastructure that needed to be repaired and remediated is not something that developers get financing for. They're able to finance sort of the development, and so the TAD was able to fill the role of identifying kind of what the community wanted through the public process and partners, with the city, and then work with developers to identify those barriers and try to be flexible. Like our role at Invest Atlanta is to use these tools that we have to help fill that gap between what the neighborhood needs, the land on the ground, and what developers are able to do to make the project work. And so in this case, you can see there's a Publix there and some ancillary retail. And originally the community wanted some density there. It would also help support some of the retail everybody wanted. But you know how things go. The project got started in 2014 at the end of the Great Recession. And so they moved forward without a residential component at that time. It was really from 2014 to 2017 that this was developed. And so the TAD funded all of the infrastructure. And then the developer, covered all the rest of the cost. You go to the next slide. The current situation now is the green to the left is what was developed by the TAD supported funds. And you can see I left the Moore's Mill. They constructed a new road. The TAD reimbursed the developer for that, in addition to lots of underneath the ground and new curb and sidewalks. But now on the left, under the blue, at this time, it took a couple years, but now the residential is in place. It's market rate apartment units, and that development brought additional retail to the ground floor. And if you go to within itself, it also has that little red connection on the side is part of the development, but it provides additional connectivity between what used to be this albatross of a site. On the ground, the next slide kind of shows you a little bit of how the before on the left looked, and now what that exact same point on the street looks like today. Some of the points that Sharon brought up, that design and everything is a real important aspect of this revitalization work. The city, I think we'll hear about that later with Doug. The city design, the zoning requirements and the way they ask you to bring the development up to the street is really important. And then you were working with the community to help put that vision together. This is what they wanted. They wanted to be able to have a better way to interact with the site, have it have the amenities that they wanted. In addition to the public, there's a bank, there's a Piedmont healthcare, primary care, small office, and then coffee shops and things like this. In addition to those new, housing opportunities. So if you advance to the next slide, I think I'm going to turn it over to Samira to talk about other ways TAD has impacted some neighborhoods.
But Samira, just before you start, Maya is actually on. Maya, are you?
How does this sound?
This is much better.
Yeah,
better.
Okay, let me just go back really quickly to your slides and we'll go through those before we get started. Okay, Samira?
No problem. Sorry about that, guys.
It's much better.
Awesome.
I think your microphone was just fighting you.
Yes. My computer is probably tired from a long day of work, so I understand. But super nice to meet all of you again. As I was saying, I am the Business Retention and Expansion Program Manager on our ED team. So I support existing businesses in their efforts. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit today about what are developers looking at for this site. So Ashley has kind of touched on how Invest Atlanta supports revitalization in some of our neighborhoods. And Sharon touched on, urban density, how we're seeing more and more apartments come in and the need for us to just have way more housing than we normally would. So when we're looking at these commercial sites and retailers coming into Atlanta and choosing where they're going to go, how do they decide that? So the first thing they kind of look at when they're looking for a physical site is the demographics. They want to know who lives in the area. Are they high income? Are they low income? Are they college educated? Have they gone to school? What kind of people live in the neighborhood? They're also going to look at some things like traffic flow. So is it a high traffic count? Your bigger stores like Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco, they're going to want a lot of people to be passing by and seeing them throughout the day. So they're going to look at the traffic flow. Accessibility. Is this site easily accessible? Is it close to a highway? Is it close to an interstate? Different retailers and different developers will be looking for different things in terms of accessibility. Is it really hard to get to? Is the traffic intersection, is it signalized, or are there just 4 stop signs there? How hard will it be for people to get to the site? What improvements will need to be done to the site to make it easier for people to get there? Some things that kind of go hand in hand is zoning regulations and business-friendly environments. So is the site zoned for what the developer needs to use it for? We all know that there are different zonings that different pieces of land may have. Some land has residential zoning, commercial zoning, industrial zoning. What is that site zoned for? Is it zoned for a grocery store, or will we have to rezone it to get the zoning we may need? In different municipalities that may add on, 6 months, a year, it may add on meetings with the community. So do we have a friendly zoning already? Along with that, is it a business friendly environment? So community feedback this day means a lot to different developers. So do they have to deal with the community? Will they have to make concessions to different neighborhood groups? What is it going to be like interacting with the local government? Are they going to be able to get their project through if they bring a project to that neighborhood? Those are things developers are thinking about. And lastly, they're thinking about competition. So are there competitors already in that area? Are they already in that market? If so, are they doing well or are they struggling? I know you've probably noticed there are sometimes Publix and Kroger's right next to each other. Neither of them are losing business. They're both doing successful. So that means there's enough in the market for both of them. But at that point, the consumer is just choosing between a brand. It's almost like, do you like Publix better? Do you like Kroger better? Which one is going to have what you need and which price do you like better? So along with physical things for the site, they're also looking at market research. Again, they're looking at traffic patterns. They're looking at consumer behavior. Is this consumer spending money in this neighborhood? What is the consumer spending power? If so, how much can they spend? When are they spending at? What does it look like? They're going to look at the existing stores in that area. They're going to see, how are their sales looking? Are they doing successful? What is the future growth for this area? Are we anticipating more and more people living here, more and more people moving here? How is the neighborhood and the market trending? And then lastly, they're going to look at demand. Is the product that they're bringing actually needed? So if you have somewhere like Atlantic Station where there's already a Publix, there's a movie theater, there's a bowling alley, they're probably not going to bring another grocery store there. They're not going to bring another big box because that area is already saturated with that. They have Target, they have Publix, they don't need another grocer like Kroger coming there. So these different retailers are looking for demand. What's already in the area? How far is the nearest commercial retailer who offers the same product as me away? Am I even needed in this area? Next slide, Michelle. So lately, if you've been around our team, you'll notice we have a lot of focus on grocery initiative. So I noticed in this sector, this is one of the most popular examples and one of the most common questions we get is, can my neighborhood have a grocery store? Can it have another grocery store? Can it have this type of grocery store? I wanted to point out there are different kinds of developers. So the developers that work on behalf of these companies like Aldi and Whole Foods, they have a real estate team who go out and look for sites. And then there are some developers who do infill development. So they're creating these boxes and they're going out and searching for the tenants themselves. But just in our correspondence, I wanted to share what these specific retailers are looking for when they find an area. So for example, Aldi, they're looking for a place where they can put a 22,000 square feet store, which is about 2.5 acres. They want somewhere that is located close already to regional shopping districts and has a convenient access to populations. So you probably won't find an Aldi in the middle of the country somewhere where it's not highly populated. They want to have a daily traffic count in excess of 20,000 vehicles per day and a dense trade area of population. I know a lot of people are also interested in Whole Foods, so they want to have 200,000 people within a 20-minute drive. So if you live in a suburb somewhere, you might not have that same population density that Whole Food would require. They also want a larger number of college-educated residences. So this could be they have a higher price point, so they want to make sure that the income is higher, and therefore that they may have more college-educated residences. And then again, Lidl, they're all kind of looking for the same thing. We're noticing they want to be in an area that's high traffic, highly visible, a good amount of acreage, and a dense population within the local radius. Next slide, Michelle. So how true is this? Like, are developers really following these kind of quote unquote rules? I wanted to give an example that fits perfectly within what Lidl is looking for. If any of you have driven down Memorial, you've noticed within the last year, there's been a new grocer come, which is Lidl. This one actually isn't in the city of Atlanta. It's right outside of our city limits, but I still wanted to point it out because I thought it was a great example. So the area, the neighborhood is kind of like the Kirkwood neighborhood, the Memorial Drive area. So CoStar considers that a suburban zone. So if we look, this graphic right on the bottom comes straight from Lidl's website. So they're telling us exactly what they want to see. Within a 2-mile radius, they want to see at least 25,000 people. Within a 3-mile radius, they want to see 50,000 people. For that median income, they want to see 70,000 to 80,000 per household. And they want the population to be growing. So within the population radius, a 3-mile radius, they want the population to be growing by 2% every year. So this is what I was able to pull the demographics within a radius around Lidl to show us. How true is that? So, sorry, I don't know if someone's off mute.
We are.
But within the population radius, a 2-mile radius of Lidl, they have 53,000 people that live within a 2-mile radius of Lidl. So that hits their 3-mile radius requirement, which is 50,000 people. Lidl already has that within 2 miles. So that hits one thing. The average household income around this Lidl is $124,000. So that's well above their requirement of $70,000. The consumer spend in a 2-mile radius around this Lidl, I think the address is 1855 Memorial Drive, is $207 million per year just on food and alcohol. So that means the households around in this 2-mile radius, they're spending this amount of money just on food and alcohol. So that includes grocery shopping, eating out at restaurants, and purchasing alcohol. That's a pretty good consumer spend for this size neighborhood and this smaller radius. And then for traffic count, we have the cross streets of Memorial Drive and Wilkinson and Memorial Drive and Clay Street. Both of those streets are picking up about 40,000 people a day combined. So 19,000 on Wilkinson and 20,000 on Clay Street. So this shows us developers are actually looking for these statistics that they put out. They want to make sure they have the right size land. They want to make sure that people live in the neighborhood and are going to populate this retail store, whether it's an office, whether it's a grocery store, a neighborhood market. They want to make sure there's actually a customer base that's either passing by on the way home from work, walking by through the neighborhood, somebody who's going to go and frequent those locations. And then they want to make sure they have money to spend. So you want to make sure they want to make sure they're putting places where people will actually be able to purchase the products that they're supplying. And lastly, again, the traffic count that people are going by and stopping en route. So there's a lot that goes into developers picking these different sites. We all try and work together. I know Invest Atlanta has our own efforts where we're working directly with developers. We're recruiting tenants and different businesses that we want to see, and also taking community feedback and working on getting what the community wants to see in their neighborhoods. But there is different things that the businesses need to actually make the final decision to come to different areas. So that's all I have for you guys today, and I'll toss it back to Michelle. Samira.
Thank you, Maya. And I'll give Michelle a second to get back to our point in the presentation. Go back forward right here. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Samira Ajani, and I am the Assistant Director for Westside Initiatives with Invest Atlanta. And so the geography that I serve, as it states in my title, falls on the west side. Those 10 TADs that Ashley highlighted, I provide oversight and management of 3, which include 2 that you see here on the screen, Perry Bolton TAD and Westside TAD, the 3rd being Hallowell MLK TAD. So, what I'd like to offer to this conversation this evening, just thinking back to some of this commentary that Ashley went over in her slides and her presentation, and really highlighting, some really impactful and catalytic projects, the Moore's Mill project, the Center for Civic and Human Rights, are all projects that have been supported and really been carried forward by larger developers. What I really like to underscore, and what my experience has been working with businesses and the business community on the west side of Atlanta, is that development does not only happen from those who have national corporations and large and deep pockets of resources. What you will find in these areas and these communities is that development also takes place by smaller business owners, people who have an invested interest in the neighborhood because maybe they have grown up in that community, they started their business in that neighborhood, they may have gone to school in that area and have the civic desire to really see the community grow and change. So what I'm offering here is just some examples with this slide, is some examples of how that is done. So the first property here at 2056 Donnelly Hallowell is a property that was purchased by a business owner in the Hallowell corridor. He's an attorney who previously purchased an old Bank of America building and converted that space to his law firm space, and was able to acquire the adjacent structure here at 2056. So you see the photo of the site boarded up. That property has sat in the community for a significant time, probably over 20 years vacant and blighted to the community. And out of a sense of really wanting to participate in the change happening in this corridor, he was able to build a relationship. This developer was able to build a relationship with a healthcare partner. Most of us would recognize them as Humana, but Humana has several different, arms to it. And so this particular healthcare facility is named Centerwell and is currently under development and very close to completion along the corridor. And so this is a project that we've provided an investment in. The total project cost was somewhere around $3 million. So really seeing that there are people that live in these communities, work in these communities, business communities, that are willing to leverage their assets and their resources to see their neighborhoods be revitalized. And so again, this is a community amenity. It serves the process of revitalizing neighborhoods by offering an amenity that this corridor has not really had access to. This would be one of the first medical facilities and full service medical facilities that is being built out in the community currently. The second example I'm going to highlight is
same slide. Sorry. The second example I'd like to highlight below is another building that has sat vacant in the community for a number of years that was acquired by a husband and wife. You know, the unique shape and structure of this facility provided the space that both of them needed to operate their businesses. Each of them is an entrepreneur. The wife is a CPA. The husband is a martial arts instructor. So the house portion of this building has been converted to the wife's CPA firm, and the back of the house is really serving as a martial arts academy. So some very innovative uses in terms of how to bring these structures back online and activate these spaces. This is another building, as I may have mentioned, that has sat in the community for over 2 decades, vacant and unused. And the couple themselves have invested nearly, again, $2 to $3 million to bring this asset back to the neighborhood. So all of that to say is really that development happens in various ways in communities. It's not always the large scale developer that's going to come in and make things happen. A lot of times it can be just, you know, people who have, you know, a desire to see their communities grow and thrive. And that all contributes to this conversation that we're having about revitalization and density, because it provides supportive services, it provides the amenities that are needed to serve the population that we're anticipating to come into these communities over time. Next slide. Okay, so you know, when Ashley started, she gave a little bit of overview of the TAD. So, you know, largely when we think about the TAD, we think about how, you know, that has gone into development of housing and providing other amenities, and that those resources are provided directly to the developer. But we, as the Economic Development Authority, are at liberty to create and stand up programs as well that serve the community, and definitely have tried to do that in a particular area on the West Side. So one way that that's happened is through our West Side Acquisition and Disposition Program. This is a program that was started around 2014 in response to the economic activities that are impacting 2 of our neighborhoods of Vine City and English Avenue. And when I say economic activity, I'm sure you all are aware that around this time is when conversations about the new stadium were really kicking off, and the community was really anticipating what kind of change that would bring to the neighborhood. So Invest Atlanta got involved. We had a number of discussions with community members and stakeholders where they identified the need for affordable housing creation and preservation as one of their key priorities for stabilizing the neighborhood, as well as ensuring that there are opportunities for current residents to continue to live in those communities and benefit from the resources that were anticipated. So using funds from our West Side Tax Allocation District, the Invest Atlanta acquired 24 single-family properties, 11 multifamily properties, and 2 commercial properties across both neighborhoods. And currently we are working with 7 development partners that are engaged in development, the revitalization of these units. Now, the 2014 to now, you know, it would seem that all this property should have been revitalized and restored by now, but a lot of these units still sit untouched, undeveloped. And you can imagine that some of the past 3 years has been an impediment to seeing that work come to life. But we are now in a better position and seeing ourselves positioned to move this work forward and anticipate more of that success over the next few years. And the example here is at 507 English Avenue, one of the multifamily properties that we acquired. The bottom image is showing the redevelopment that was completed by West Side Future Fund. The last thing I'll say here on this slide is that to ensure that the affordability is maintained at these sites for these units. Invest Atlanta has engaged these developers by allowing them to build, improve, or purchase the improvement or build an improvement on sites that may be vacant land, but we retain the ownership of the dirt. So we ground lease these properties into perpetuity. The developer is responsible for maintaining and meeting certain compliance measures around affordability at those sites. And that's specific to rental property, where property is housing is being developed for sale in the neighborhood. The requirement for those developers is that the property be transferred to the Atlanta Land Trust, where they are able to establish a model similar to our ground leasing process that will keep those homes affordable upon resale. Next slide. Okay, and I will quickly go over another initiative that we are very excited to be launching, hopefully in the near future. Again, using Westside TAD dollars in 2014, Invest Atlanta purchased property from formerly owned by Morris Brown College. What you see here pictured in the top right picture is an outline of about 7.5 acres that sits along Martin Luther King Boulevard and Sunset Avenue in the Vine City community. This property houses the former Student Center, Hickman Hall, and the US Postal Office. So this is a site that we are anticipating bringing a new development to the neighborhood. A mixed use project is being contemplated. The rendering that you see is just, and it's not maybe not the best image, my apologies for that. It's just conceptual in terms of what can be offered at this site, a combination of housing products, multifamily housing, townhomes, things of that nature, the retail facing MLK opportunities for new retail to come into the community, and green space that can be developed. There is a trail that is going to traverse the site that the Path Foundation is working on, and we really want to work to tie in those measures. In addition to honoring the history and preserving the cultural fabric of the neighborhood, these are all values that our team has been contemplating, and it is our hope that as we search to identify a developer, that they will bring this community vision to life in terms of the aspects, the values that the community has identified as important, not just around what they see in the development, but how that is being developed. And again, this site will be ground leased to a qualified development team that meets those objectives. And so I believe that may be my last slide. I'm gonna turn it back over to Ashley to briefly talk about other ways that we manage city-owned assets.
Yeah, so we serve the role for the city as the development authority of being responsible for disposition of city-owned property when the city looks to redevelop those. And there's a big initiative now with this mayor and beginning with Mayor Bottoms to identify underutilized or vacant city-owned property, and also working with partners to ask APS, MARTA, and others to also identify such properties that could be evaluated, identified for how it could better serve the community, as well as the city's goal at large of creating more affordable housing. So as those come up, we work closely with the city to put those out for RFP. Again, using some of the mechanisms like Samira talked about, keeping ownership of the land or other mechanisms to kind of keep the affordability by retaining ownership, but letting the development community, put together good proposals based on the goals and objectives, both of the community and of the city. And so I think it's a real important, message that as, we work on all these initiatives, both in the TAD, big projects and small, and we work on the disposition acquisition activities. It's not just about transactions and how many units and how much investment we leverage. We do track that, and it's really important that we're maximizing the bang for our buck for our communities and the tax dollars that we're responsible for. But we really work with all the partners to identify and advance the goals of communities for what they want to see for revitalization, as well as the bigger part, policy initiatives of the city, to really find the ways where we can fill that gap between with what Maya talked about, with what developers are doing and how they're trying to get those retailers in. If there's something missing, especially if it's financing that we can fill with one of our programs, we want to use those funds to help bring them when they might not otherwise, to really make sure that we're getting equitable access as best we can, to redevelopment activities and the different housing options, retail options, and employment options that fill those places. That's it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ashley. I'm sorry, go ahead, Samantha. I was just going to throw it over to you.
Oh, well, all right, I'm here. We would like to actually have our director of our Office of Design, Doug Young, come in.
Hey there, everybody. Good evening. Thanks, Samantha. My name is Doug Young. I'm the director of the Department of City Planning's Office of Design. And I want to talk a little bit about how what we've heard tonight relates to the city's planning work, and sort of through a series of comments and questions, I think we'll figure out how these two seemingly different processes might and should work together. So we've heard a lot of conversation tonight and examples of development scenarios, development criteria, location criteria, what have you. But one of the things that is really underlying all that is, how do developers know what the future of an area is? How do they know the future of the neighborhood? What are the goals and objectives of a given neighborhood? And how is that packaged together? And so that the city's role in that regard, with our partners like InvestLand and others, is to help neighborhoods or corridors or parts of the city develop viable and sustainable planning documents that capture those goals, those visions, and really create a predictable and clear development framework for going forward. One of the things that I think, my experience with the city is that folks who are in the development business, while they're looking for opportunities and they have certain criteria of which they base their decisions on, one of the things they also look for is predictability and knowing what the future holds. What are they getting into? What is their site in an area that will be considered to be a commercial node or a commercial corridor for some time in the future? So they know their investment will be carried forward and be supported by other activity around them. And to know that, there needs to be a good, solid plan that provide that clear, predictable future. And they want to operate in that environment, but at the same time, having that predictable framework, that clear framework, allows the community, the neighborhood, the business corridor, what have you, to describe what they expect from the development teams. So instead of working from a position of reaction to potential development proposals, it's clear from the get-go that there's already an established framework that has broad, consistent support from a community, from a commercial corridor. And with a good, solid neighborhood plan or corridor plan or similar sort of effort, you can have that, and that's where the planning department can come in and help create those documents, those frameworks that can be adopted by the city and become part of the city's official framework for going forward. The other thing neighborhood plans can do, or corridor plans can do, is they allow the communities to describe what they want to change in their neighborhood, what going forward, what's their expectation of what's going to be different, but also what needs to stay the same? What are the things they value, be they social and cultural values or physical values? Is there physical characteristics of their neighborhood or their corridor that they want to see retained or reinforced or even reestablished that might be missing when folks come in? What is the physical framework that communities want to see when folks are looking to do projects in their neighborhood? They're coming to you all with a proposal, and the question is, does that proposal fit in with your neighborhood plan, that neighborhood framework? And then that also allows folks to both the community and the developer to have a common language about what is the future of that, of that neighborhood as documented in that plan. So, that's a great way of thinking about neighborhood planning work at that level. But the other thing I'd mention is that those neighborhood plans and other efforts by the city of Atlanta get rolled up to or are part of the city's comprehensive development plan, the CDP. And so that is the same kind of approach that you can have at the city level about predictable frameworks, about establishing your goals and vision. In this case, it would be for the whole city, the comprehensive development plan. And so that can capture that at that same level. In the city's comprehensive development plan, we're getting ready later this year to start to update that through a pretty significant comprehensive development plan process that involves lots of community engagement at the neighborhood and MPU level. And that's going to set the stage for the next phase of the zoning rewrite. You also probably heard about that as well. So the current zoning rewrite phase is closed out. There's the 4 workshops that focus on 4 key topics around the city of Atlanta. And with that information, that team is going to be starting to pull together some words and text to help capture all that. In the meantime, we're going to start on our comprehensive development planning process, which will be focused on all the key elements of managing a city's future, including land use and transportation are pretty key elements to start with. And so if those are also set well in the CDP, then the zoning code then takes the CDP, which is a high level visionary kind of document, and brings that back down to a true development framework. So if the vision is for a certain kind of corridor or a commercial node or a residential development for that matter, that overall policy framework is set by the CDP, and then the zoning code can implement that and become very specific about the parameters, the requirements for developing particular pieces of property or a particular corridor. So you have the development community with its interests in property and ideas and that creativity that can come along with that. And then the city and the neighborhoods and the corridors can have an established framework through the planning process and the zoning process to set expectations, make clear what the envisioned future is, and to have a common ground to speak about that, going forward. So the Department of City Planning focuses on that in partnership with Best Atlanta, and we are excited to get to the next phase of the zoning rewrite, and also the next phase of the first phase really of the comprehensive development plan process.
Well, I believe it is now time for our questions. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand in the queue. I want to make sure my screen isn't frozen. Oh, we do have questions. Okay. Nicole, we'll start with you.
Hi, so I wanted to ask about future use. So how do we as a community handle the issues with developers in the city not looking at future use when developers are coming in and building on a site that's specific for when you guys talked about including commercial and retail space based on the current amount of people that live in the area, and yet there's already development sites approved and underway, yet they're not being included in what could be as to amount of people in the community.
Nicole, who was that directed to?
It was the first group that talked about developments with being a smart density. and having commercial come in and, having enough people there, why developers bring what they bring in.
Maybe Maya. Oh,
I mean, I think that was under me, but I mean, that wouldn't be a developer not following, I mean, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I spoke to that, but answering the question on following the, zoning requirements, I'm not sure who should answer that question though.
I'll jump in right quick. I don't think it was directed to me, but I think the question, if I may, Ms. Nicole, is that there's development occurring in a neighborhood that will change the demographics. And so does the evaluation of development teams take into account what's already happening on the ground in the neighborhood?
Correct.
so I believe Maya is not here. She had another presentation. There's someone else from Invest Atlanta that may be able to jump in and answer that.
Sure. So when you, the development team, you mean like, the outside developers, are they looking at what's already underway in the community, or are we looking at what's already underway?
I guess both. And is there a way to have Invest Atlanta and developers look at future use and the future amount of people that will be living in the area for the amenities that they could build for, versus currently they only build for what exists, and it's going to be 2 to 3 years before the other developments are finished.
Yeah. So I think in terms of what's coming and what the neighborhood's like working towards, so we do, like the role of like Doug and the planning at the city, where they work with communities to help them identify and communicate their plan. Then, we look, we take that into consideration, and as communities advocate for those things, we're working to shape our programs to fill them. And so it's kind of a little bit of, I think every situation might be a little bit different. When you look at that Moores Mill Village example, there was a lot of adjacent land that was really underutilized as well, on a major corridor. And oftentimes, residential, multifamily, be they townhomes or apartments or condos, work well on those corridors because they're real close to shops and stuff once they're built. So that development that came really was looking at the future opportunities because they'd been identified, knowing that they would come. My coworkers are not cooperating, so I'm sorry. But then also, that like Publix to sign on to that deal did need to see that there were the rooftops sort of in place, and that the future multifamily that was part of the development didn't get built right away was in the plan. So, the developer tries to look at that big picture and talk to those retailers. That's what happened in that scenario. Is the developer saw the bigger vision and was really working to communicate that. After the Great Recession, there was a little while where Publix was on and then off again and then back on. And so the developer, with support from Invest Atlanta and info from the city, was communicating that bigger picture and what they were signing on for. And Publix had, I think worked to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I'm going to answer that question in a slightly different way. And I do think that it would be of some benefit to take note of this question and bring it back to our economic development team and really underscore. So I'm going to step out on a limb and just explain in terms of our approach to business attraction. So Invest Atlanta is data driven. We do a lot of data collection and we do a lot of of work to identify what projects are going to be in the pipeline coming up. We use different softwares that will let us see what is happening on the private market outside of the investments that we are making into the community. And though all of that information, being armed with that information is what helps us to be able to go out and advocate for businesses to come into communities. So I hope that kind of touches on what your question was alluding to, but I certainly think that it would be a good idea for us to make note of that and elaborate on it more.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes, thank you. I think this might be addressed to Doug because he was talking about it as well, although several of you have said about figuring out what the neighborhood wants. And I'm wondering if you're speaking specifically to what Invest Atlanta gets involved in and the TAD thing, or are you talking about for you figure out what the neighborhood wants in the context of the entire CDP? And then how do you figure out what the neighborhood wants?
Sure. So I'll speak to the planning part of that. So when I was talking about it, I was speaking about the holistic approach of a thriving, healthy neighborhood. So part of that is economic development and commercial development opportunities, but it also has to do with environmental issues, public safety, transportation, cultural memory, identity, those kind of things. The city of Atlanta has, and I'm not sure where you are living, but a lot of our neighborhoods in Atlanta have neighborhood master plans already, and many of them cover, 6 or 7, 8, 9, 10 topics, generally the same kinds of conversations. And when the city does master planning work, it does so in partnership with the community association, neighborhood association, and then eventually the MPU's involved because they typically get adopted by the city as well, and become part of the CDP actually. Most of the time when the CDP is updated, we incorporate this, what are technically called small area plans into that overall document. So we like to look at master planning work as neighborhood planning work as a holistic topic beyond just economic development and residential development.
And are you talking in terms of just new development or like repurposing of existing buildings? Like you had the picture of the 2 peach tree there. Is that going to be holistically developed as well?
Again, I'll speak to the planning aspect of that. Our neighborhood plans and small area plans, corridor plans, what have you, deal with new ideas, renovation, rehab, the connections between the parcels. So I can't speak specifically to the 2 Peachtree program. Someone on the call may be able to do that, but as far as the planning effort goes, we think all those things are related. So, both what happens to existing buildings, properties, and places and spaces, those places in between buildings, if you will, and then what needs to be augmented, what needs to be, like I said, kept, revised, added to, all of that from a planning perspective, at least. If someone else wants to speak to 2 Peachtree.
Yeah, I'll talk about some stuff and get to 2 Peachtree. So the role of the city is really like the holder of the planning process with communities and the zoning code, and ultimately then codes enforcement. If a developer needs something rezoned or a variance, right, they follow the city's process for that. The city will also work with communities as they've done a plan to do some preactive rezoning so that zoning that might be in place might be not conducive to what the community wants. And so it is possible to sometimes do some proactive rezoning, right? Where instead of having C1 commercial zoning that could enable like a gas station or a convenience store, you do some MRC where you can still have commercial. It's going to require maybe some mixed residential with it, like more sort of quality of life zoning. So that's the role of the city. With the TADs, each TAD has a redevelopment plan for when it was established, whenever the TAD was created. And then, as we develop the program, we over time, as the priorities really those redevelopment plans are still the goals, but different priorities come and go at higher importance to the community over time. So we will tailor the programs that we're advertising and say, oh, you can apply for these funds to do this or this or this. We do, respond to feedback from the communities over time in that way. When it comes to Peachtree, right? So the downtown redevelopment goals include bringing more residents to downtown. Downtown was really very much a CBD that started to empty out largely more than other parts of the city after hours. And so building more of a 24-hour community was one of the goals there. So the two Peachtree, that was an opportunity where we're working then also as one of the implementation arms of the city to advance city policy. And so to bring more residents to downtown, and then after COVID, responding to the changing needs for office, led to that opportunity. So that was kind of like a transaction that presented itself, and it met the various policy goals of the city, the current administration, as well as the community's goals and the TAD redevelopment plan. And so that's how we were able, that made that come to pass. And then the redevelopment of it will sort of, follow the existing plans that are in place and involve, community feedback as that sort of comes together.
Yeah, I'll also say that, Ashley touched on the redevelopment plans that are in place for each of the TADs themselves. Those become dated. I think, for example, I think it's the redevelopment plan for West Side dates back to like 1996. So you can imagine that lots of things have changed and projects that were identified in those plans are obsolete at this point. But through Invest Atlanta, we have the opportunity to really engage the neighborhoods again in real time to respond to current development, current growth. A great example of that with the West Side is our involvement in the West Side Land Use Framework Plan. We help to facilitate that work. We utilize TAD dollars to work with the community and neighbors in that community to come up with guidelines for development for Vine City and English Avenue. And that plan was actually adopted by the city. So, gives it a little bit more teeth than just saying that, oh, these are just some ideas that the neighborhood came up with. We really use that to refer back to. We hold our developers accountable to that. And we craft a lot of our objectives and outcomes around the projects that we work on based on those plans that have been created in tandem with the community. So that's just another way that we approach supporting neighborhoods in defining their plans. We're not at the table to make decisions for them. We're really there as advocates to support the work that they're interested in accomplishing.
Okay, Ms. Battle, if you would like to go ahead and ask your question. And everyone, mind you, we don't have a lot of time, so we will try to make these really brief and also,
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but
What happened?
You're muted. You went back on mute.
Ms. Battle, okay, there you are.
if you have areas in your neighborhood, I'm not sure who to address this, and you want to refer them to Invest Atlanta as far as to develop these areas, how would you go about that?
Well, I'll take a stab, or you want to go first, Samira?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again? I kind of missed the first part of it.
If you have blighted areas that are under development, how would someone in the neighborhood go about referring these areas, abandoned buildings and such, maybe to potentially to Invest Atlanta or some other institution to get these areas developed?
So we're regularly in conversations with developers that have acquired some of the sites that you're referring to. If there's other sites that are of interest or that you would like to know more about or understand what the status of those sites are, you can definitely reach out to myself. I'm not sure if our contact information is listed in the presentation, but I'm happy to drop that in the chat. And we also can help to identify, what is the current activity planned for those sites. But in general, we don't, from a community development standpoint, we're not necessarily in a position to, make a person who's holding property develop their property. We can only really advocate, provide them with information about what our programs offer, what those incentives can do to assist them in bringing those properties back into some constructive use.
Yeah, it starts with the property owner. They hold the keys to that change for what you described. And so if you're able, if you're able to get in touch with them and you want to connect them to us, so you can get our contact information and we can figure out based on the address what's available. And sometimes it could also be, your council person may be also able to kind of help figure out, is it currently codes enforcement? Is this owner already known to the city? Or can maybe, involve the city or Invest Atlanta or other, folks as appropriate.
Erica Wigfall?
Yeah, this is actually Miranda Blaze. We're sharing a computer. So I don't know who to direct this to, maybe somebody with Invest Atlanta, but when we talk about bringing businesses into the community, is there any prioritization or incentives for Atlantans starting a business in Atlanta versus giving opportunities to non-Atlanta residents?
So, we have some small business programs, so that we have loan programs as well as grant programs. And so we do require, so I can definitely speak about our grant program that our group manages. We typically are working with many existing businesses. And so we do require that for grants or some of the non-loans, and even many of our loans, you do have to be an existing Atlanta business. You don't have to be a resident, but you do have to already be invested in the community. And then we also, will also prioritize or really direct some of those funds towards, small business owners who are in some of our disinvested areas who've had less access to capital over time and less investment over time. But we do not require that the owner be a resident. Oftentimes they are, and oftentimes they're not, but they've been a long time business owner in the city. So, one of the things that for residents, I kind of wish our economic development team, I think that would be a good question to refer to them in terms of some of their business accelerator stuff. We have the Women Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is for residents who have a business or are, looking to grow it or have a home-based business that they're looking to exit into a formal space. So that in that way they're helping Atlanta residents, start up or grow a nascent business or business idea.
Graham?
Hi, thanks for the time. My question is for the Invest Atlanta folks, and it's specifically about affordable housing. I learned recently there was a Reynoldstown proposal for affordable housing seeking funding from Invest Atlanta that then the neighborhood association voted no against it. Anyway, my question is, how does Invest Atlanta deal with getting community feedback and input where appropriate versus letting a neighborhood kind of prevent any affordable housing in that neighborhood.
So everyone, the questions have to be pertaining specifically to the course content for today, like the things we're talking about for
Oh, well,
today.
I thought Ashley, she was talking about engaging with the community and things. So that's where my
Mhm.
question came from.
We can answer it in a way that connects with the course content. So there is with the affordable housing, be it in the like our multifamily bonds or some of the other programs that support housing do require community engagement. We require it at the NPU level. So we do require that a developer makes a presentation to the NPU stating, typically they're going through the NPU anyway for a development most of the time. But we do require that they say, and we're seeking Invest Atlanta funding, or an incentive for this project. And then they get a letter from the NPU, stating whether or not it was a vote and whether or not it's in support or denial, or not support, I guess, is the way. And so sometimes it's kind of two different things. So when there's already zoning in place and the land use requirements enable a development, and the community doesn't necessarily like what's going in there. Sometimes it's less about, well, could you, put some more parking, or could you split the parking up? Sometimes we have conversations, the community has conversations about design and other things that they want included for, on the ground practical purposes. And then sometimes it's, we don't want any affordable housing, or we don't want it. And so, our board, we have a board, and there's committee members on the board that include committees of the board that include, various folks. And so they take that into consideration. They kind of look at the information given, and then ultimately, our board makes a decision, whether or not to fund. And sometimes, there really are, if it's actionable and it's like, I asked for this and this is because there's an on the ground reason and it meets our goals, and we have this plan that says, we would like wider sidewalks, or, not all the parking up in front of the building. We want some of it behind the building so we keep our walkability. That's really an actionable thing that a developer can respond to, and that our board can say, hey, like, can you all go back and work on that? Are there site limitations, or is this reasonable? So like sometimes those conversations happen, at the board and committee level, and other times it's, we don't want affordable housing, but it's, this is private property, and it is like by right, and it meets goals of the city, and we can't, the board is, let everybody know, we can't let everybody say we don't want some kind of density or some kind of housing in our community just cause. So it's kind of a balance. Right. It's case by case to kind of answer your question.
Larry Fraser.
Thank you. I just have a question on how does the density impact the property values for legacy residents? Specifically when you have like a block base full of single family homes, and then, someone comes in with a density product. How does that affect their property values?
Well, every development's different, but by and large, investment into a property drives up its value. So whether that's commercial development or residential, and if it's residential, multifamily or single family. Typically, multifamily investment per acre, for the size, requires a lot more, financial investment from the developer. And so actually those new developments, or like significant rehabs or renovations of properties of any sort, raises their value, their taxable value, raises the tax base, and then also the market value. And so, other amenities that it might bring, so it's going to typically make things more, more valuable, more expensive. And, we both are, we speak to communities who are balancing that. We want to improve our property values. We want to improve, the things that are coming. And then property values also improve based on what's in them. Like if there's also a grocery or a coffee shop or a retail, or, you know, the kind of mix that goes across the various developments. And so that's harder to quantify. But by and large, like new development, that's investment, generates higher value.
Yeah, but also from a policy standpoint, and you may be familiar already with some of the initiative that the city has tried to launch to ensure that those increases in property tax values do not have as much of an impact on our lower income residents and our seniors. A program that was piloted in the West Side was to support eligible homeowners with receiving assistance with paying the delta in their tax increases. I think that's a program that we want to continue to model and we want to continue to advocate for. It's going to require a lot of resources from the philanthropic community to be able to do that, but it's something that we do definitely take into consideration within our work. And yeah, we have a number of other programs as well to help homeowners be able to preserve their homes, like our owner occupied rehab programs that will help seniors and you know, veterans and anyone who meets those qualifications to be able to make improvements to their home that will also allow them to participate in increasing and improving the value of their home so that they have access to that wealth building opportunity as well.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Jared Evans.
Hi, thank you for taking the question. The Princeton Lakes TAD was just declared substantially complete through a resolution that was adopted by the City Council on May 1st. What can one of the presenters tell us about the timeline and the process for establishing a new TAD so that redevelopment tool can be redeployed somewhere else in the city to help another community?
So in establishing a TAD, I'm going to be very frank, it's not likely that new TADs are going to be developed in the city. One thing that we may not have touched on in our overview of the TADs is that there are 3 taxing bodies that really support the TADs. And so it takes some coordination and some agreement across those entities. And as other jurisdictions, particularly within Fulton County, see the value of utilizing this, you know, an area can only support so many TADs. So, you know, it's almost to a point now where you know, other jurisdictions are seeing the benefit of that, and we're going to have to start sharing the wealth outside of the city of Atlanta itself. So you know, my response to that would be that we're not actively you know, considering other areas where a TAD could be opened. If that were to be the case, it would have to be a decision that is agreed upon by those taxing bodies, and it would have to be really based on an urgent or really strong priority for the city.
Do we have any, excuse me, do we have any more questions? Oh, awesome. We made great time. Okay, everyone, I'm going to share my screen with you as we close out.
It looks like there was a last question that came in through the chat.
We got
possibly.
it. We
Okay.
got to wrap up. We'll get back to her. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me share the screen with you all. You all see my screen? Not quite sure.
Yes.
Okay, it's at the beginning? Okay, my bad. Okay, let's do. First of all, thank you everyone that participated tonight on today's course, especially with this being the first time we were actually doing this one. Our upcoming courses are as follows. We have this Saturday, our CD 1005 Urban Plan Academy for Community Leaders. And this class is actually full. It's also an in-person class. So I actually look forward to seeing everyone that is participating with this class. Then not next week, but the week May 24th, we will have P1009, that's our mobile workshop, Home Sweet Home. This is also an in-person course. We do have slots available if you are interested in registering for that course. It's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. in person. You must pre-register for this course. And then next month, we have CL 1005, our bylaws clinic. That is Thursday, June 8th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it is virtual. And then we kick off our Code Enforcement Academy that Saturday, which is bi-weekly from June 10th through August 5th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. with limited slots. The following week, we will have for our young adults, that's our rising 11 and 12 graders, civic engagement for young adults. That's an in-person class. We do have slots available. So if you have a rising junior or senior in your life, and you want them to get them civically engaged, or they want to figure out how to get things shaken in their neighborhood or their mini you, sign them up for that class. It's June 12th through June 16th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you have any questions about all things neighborhood planning units, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at NPU Atlanta. And we can also be found on Nextdoor at City of Atlanta Neighborhood Planning Units. You all may see in the chat as well that I sent out the link for our survey, and you also received that email. Please, 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 please complete that survey. We want to continue to make our courses matter and important and substantial. So if we don't have any more questions or comments, you all have a wonderful Thursday night, and thanks again for participating with us.
Thank you all. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Doug, David, Ashley, Samira, Maya. Did I forget anybody?
Thank you. You all have a great evening.
Thanks, Sharon.
Right.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sharon, thank you, Sharon.
You forgot me, Lee. I was in the background watching.
Thank you, Invested Land.
Bye, Vicky. Bye. Let me stop this recording.
Thank
you.
Yeah, before something else goes wrong.
Right. All right, y'all. Good night. Thank you again.
Bye, Leah. Good job.